So this is probably the nicest cover that I have read all year. Woolgathering by Patti Smith. We got a bunch of sheep in the background here. I saw this cover, and obviously I've read Patti Smith before from the book review I made earlier this year. So this is the third book I read by her. And unfortunately, I'm giving this a 2-star review because I think you should only read this if you are a big Patti Smith fan. If you come into this cold, not knowing who Patti Smith is, then you're going to be disappointed. This is only for diehard Patti Smith fans. But if you do like Patti Smith, you really should find this, because this is almost like a prequel to Just Kids. This is Patti Smith's childhood. So I've read Just Kids. I've read, oh my goodness, what was the one I read earlier this year? Devotion. And I've read Woolgathering. And Just Kids is like how she came to fame, how she found herself in her 20s, 30s. The Devotion, which I read earlier this year, is a bit more like a creative process later in life. And now this is her youth. This is her growing up. And at the beginning of the book, she says she had this feeling she really wanted to write this book, which would talk about her really early childhood days. And this book is dedicated to her father. And it talks about in the introduction how she gave this book to her father, and she was proud that her father liked this book. So it's very much about her childhood. The problem I have with it, and I think a lot of people have with it, is that these are poetic retellings of her childhood. It's very abstract. This is closer to poetry than prose than ever before I've seen. For Patti Smith, she normally is quite poetic and artistic, but here there's so little form going on. It's hard to actually understand what is being talked about. There's so little form. It's just a little bit too abstract for anyone who isn't willing to have just a sense of what her childhood was about. And there are 14 short stories in here. And I'll be honest with you, right up until 1957, I was getting it, but there's nothing that you can find here that you can't find glimpses of in her other work, and just having it just more enjoyable. It's just a more enjoyable read to read in her other works, because it's very clear what she's talking about. Here it's poetic. It's hard to tell fact from fiction, and it's hard to tell what distinguishes each of these early parts. But 1957, my goodness, that made me start crying at work. Like, that is such a powerful story. It seems to be just hidden amongst everything else here, and it was such, like, it's clear that that's a true event, and it just was so good. It was so powerful, so emotional, so provocative. But it's really just the highlight of this piece. Like, the rest of the writing is kind of hard to follow. It's hard to know where she's at, what she's doing, what she wants. It's like a very wayward youth that we have here. It's hard to know. She talks about being in the forest, or when I opened my eyes, I was surrounded by children taunting and laughing. I stood up and they pounced on the coins that had fallen from my pocket. Like, there's a piece about her having headaches, and then suddenly she'll be in a field. She'll be riding a horse, but is she really riding a horse? And of course, we always have a reference to Arthur Rimbaud. We have a reference to Robert as well. And I think without reading her other works, you wouldn't know why she's talking about Rimbaud or Robert. It's kind of, this is made for people who already are acquainted with Patti Smith's writing and kind of just her general scene. But I think I'm reaching the point where I think I've read enough Patti Smith. I've read enough Patti Smith, because I think there's almost like a formula to all this writing, and it hurts me to say this, but the majority of Patti Smith's writing is hinged on her trying to become very creative and finding men often that she admires or she wants to imitate through art, which is all very good, but it's just that theme is always there in everything she writes. It's so pertinent and full front, and just it's the center of the work, that I don't think I find anything new in these. There's no new avenues here. Um, she's very much her own voice, and I think I've heard her voice enough to know to be familiar with it. To This was almost a revisiting of things I've already read by her, and so it's hard to know how to recommend this book, because unless you have a real diehard obsession for reading Patti Smith, like unless you, like if you read more than 2 of her books and you still want to keep reading it, then like me, go ahead, go find this, because this is a chapter in her life which probably isn't covered elsewhere. But if you haven't, then, but also it's like if you get to that point, maybe there's something here I missed, but it's hard to know what more you can get from reading Patti Smith that you can't get from reading her other works. Like I almost kind of feel like I would have preferred to reread Just Kids instead of this, but of course this is a lot shorter in size, and because it's short, like poetic short stories, it's very abstract. So she changes her form, but her message, her style, not her style, her message, her content is always quite similar. So yeah, so I would probably avoid this one unless you're a big fan or you're trying to collect all of Patti Smith's works. But if you're like me and you just happen to see a really nice cover with a lot of sheep on it, and you happen to want to read something short and very abstract and formless, then maybe give this one a go. But that's about all I can say about this one. Happy reading.